Okay. 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 Alright, so this video is of my level 88 Javazon slash freezing arrow hybrid Zon. Um, this is the so-called, there's a guide, I don't know why it's called this, but it's the so-called Fishyzon. I don't know whose idea that was. But this is a pretty solid build. I like hybrid builds because I play vanilla single player. You know, I play without any of the without any ladder-only rune words. So, on the way I play the game, I can't make Infinity or any of those other ladder-only rune words. Also, Infinity is expensive as fuck. So for us single-player players, we have to find everything ourselves. I think hybrid builds are cool, and it's fun, and I think it's just basically how the game is meant to be played, you know? I think it's supposed to be a little harder than just breaking everything with an incredibly powerful rune word. So, this is the build, and honestly, for a long time, I had wanted to make a freezing arrow Amazon, but I just never got around to it. And actually, so I saw a video by Extimus, who had a full Mavs version of this set, and of this build, and this build definitely works with full Mavs. So I just wanted to throw my name in among the many, many people who are stealing and ripping off Extimus. Actually, I'm just kidding. This build existed long before he made a video about it. So let's go into the skills. Pretty basic. Max freezing arrow. Max cold arrow. You'll look at freezing arrow, you see the ice arrow gives only freeze length, so that sucks, don't bother with it. Basically you just have to max these two things. And I put a point into guided arrow. The reason I do guided arrow is because my attack rating is not amazing, and guided arrow has no attack rating, and freezing arrow is very mana heavy. It's a very mana heavy build in general, which I'll talk about, but guided arrow allows you an option to actually leech back. You could leech back some mana with this, you know. And some health. So that's very good. So sometimes if I'm low on mana, I'll just switch to guided arrow and I'll just shoot off a couple arrows. And the leech, if you have high leech, it's actually pretty good. Okay, so then over here to the jab skills, max lightning fury, max charge strike, and it doesn't matter. I pump the rest of my points into lightning strike. You know, any synergy of charge strike basically is what you should do with all your leftover points. Passive, you know, 1/1/1. I think Pierce, you put as many as you want or need. I have a bunch of plus skills, so I got to level 9 plus a razor tail. That's 100% Pierce. So just try to get as close to 100% Pierce as is practical. I tried getting a Valkyrie. I pretty much beat the game having points in Valkyrie, or 1 point. The thing about that is when you have a lot of skills and you put points into dodge, evade, avoid, they get way too high level if you have a lot of plus skills. These skills are good at like level 1, level 2, but when they're really high level, the percentages get super high, and it really, like, ranged monsters will fuck you up and you'll never be able to attack. And also I found there was kind of a weird thing that happened, which is like I would be throwing javelins, and if one of those things triggered, my javelin would go off in some fucked up direction. It would turn my character all around. It was just it was a pain in the ass and a disaster. And so for this build, you have to avoid these. You can't do them. Avoid. Okay, and so that's the skill. So the gear, like I said, this build would work with all levels of gear. And honestly, a lot of the gear that I have is really not that expensive. There are a couple high-ticket items, but I'd say it's pretty doable. And like Extimus had that video with the full maps, you know, it works with that for sure, and it works with like way cheaper shit. But let's start with the obvious stuff. Titan's Revenge upped. This is a pretty good roll. I tried Thunderstroke. Thunderstroke is nice for. In fact, I even thought about, and it's not a bad idea. If you don't, I have a lot of Javelin. I have pretty good charms, so I like to use them. I have 3 Javelin skillers, a couple bow skillers, some run walk attack rating, and then basically life and resistance charms down here, and some. So it's not a bad idea if you want to do this and switch this out. Switch to a Thunderstroke like for boss killing, because that -15 lightning resist is really good. But the problem with Thunderstroke is just the quantity, and it doesn't replenish quantity. So you actually will wind up doing more damage with Titans because you don't have to be careful, you know? When I have Titans, I'm just, you just go wham, wham, wham. You can just do it infinitely, whereas with a Thunderstroke, it's just too annoying and you can't really do that. Okay? And then obvious stuff, Ravenfrost, gotta have it. Razortail, Piercing, gotta have it. So the rest of it, I find that there's a lot of shit you can do with this build. There's like infinite choices. So I use a High Lords. The reason I do that basically is to have the skill. I thought about using Mara's, but I needed the attack speed. So I have a 20 increased attack speed gloves. I use a Silence that has 20 increased attack speed. So I hit a 60% IAS breakpoint with a Hydra Bow. There's also a 90%, which I thought about getting, but it was just a pain in the ass, and also having super fast attack speed with a skill that costs 23 mana. Like, my mana is 185, that's less than 8 arrows, so it's actually not even that good to have super high attack speed, because you'll just run out of mana incredibly quickly, and it's just like, it sucks. Don't bother. I use a Nightwings as well, basically because I have it. Honestly, Griffins is the best choice, especially because you have to mainly be a Javazon. I tried for most of the time I was leveling this character, I tried to act mostly as a freezing arrow Amazon because I just wanted to do that. I thought it'd be fun. But the thing about it is it's just not practical. And I'd be in a room shooting freezing arrows, and anytime I got in trouble, I would switch to Lightning Fury, I'd throw one javelin and the whole room would be dead. And it's like Lightning Fury is just a much better skill. And the only reason to have Freezing Arrow is for the lightning immunes. So for 90% of what you're running into, Lightning Fury, you're going to be a Javazon. But I use the Nightwings, first of all, because it has the plus skill, so it does help my Javelin side. And I do, if you look, this adds like 2.2, 1.7. It adds like 500 damage. So I like it that when I do switch, my Freezing Arrow actually does some damage. Like, it's there for me when I need it, So I like that aspect of it. Okay? Chains of Honor, I mean, give me a fucking break. It explains itself. I gotta say, for a long time, I didn't want to spend all the runes on this build. I used an Ormus. I used an Ormus for a while. And an Ormus is a really good choice for this build, and actually it gives more damage than the 2 skills on Chains of Honor. But Chains of Honor, I basically did it for the resistance. So, because I used Ormus and then a Sanctuary so I could get max resistance, because resistance is a little bit of a problem. It's a little hard to get on this build. So Chains of Honor allowed me to use this Storm Shield, which is really good. And so, yeah, I went from having, like, with Ormus and Sanctuary, 0% damage reduction to having 43. Plus, I had this Storm Shield that I had put a lightning light facet in, so yeah, and that helps a lot. Definitely good to get a facet. Yeah, definitely useful to have lightning facets. Even that -5%, even that little bit. So it's only -5. There's -15 alone, and it's not a Griffin's, but even that little bit helps quite a lot. I could really feel the difference once I switched over to this. Okay, my other ring, I'm using a Mantled Heal. I have a lot of different mana leech rings, and I tried them all, and honestly, I went with the Mantled in the end. And I was using Silkweeds for a long time for the mana on kill, and but ultimately I switched to Ormus, the reason just being more run walk, the life bonus, and the fire resist. So, yeah. Run walk is pretty important for this character as well. I have charms with run walk, so I have 20 from my charms, 40 from this, 30 from this. I'm up to 90% run walk. It's pretty good. 60 with my silence. And Gloves, these are some rare gloves I have. These are pretty good. Unfortunately, they're only one skill, but they're a bow skill, increased attack speed, life steal, a little bit of life steal, 8 strength, and 30 fire resist. Gloves are pretty, you could do, maybe you want javelin skiller gloves, maybe you want, you know, different things will work. But these are ones I had, and I thought they were pretty cool, so I'm using those. And the bow. So the bow, I'm using silence. I think this is very dope. Honestly, I think the number one thing in its favor is, first of all, the skills are good, but also the 75 all resistances. And I think it must be the best build for it. I mean, the best bow. Other than, again, I don't use the ladder only rune words. If you have an ice, that's way fucking better. But this is good. 2 to all skills, 75 all res, so my resistances are super dope on my bow side. And it has huge mana steal, 11% mana after kill, and hit blinds target is actually also pretty good. It's actually pretty useful, especially when you're fighting souls and stuff. And yeah, well, it's funny. Woo! Yeah. I think the number one problem with this build is mana. It's just so hard. I have not managed, and I don't even know if it's possible. Like I said, I don't use the ladder only rune words. The best merc weapon for this build is definitely an insight. You definitely, if you can make an insight, definitely you want that, because it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. The amount of mana this thing costs. Sometimes I'm leeching pretty good. My leech was okay there. If you have a decent group of monsters, your leech can be pretty good with your freezing arrow side. Okay, I didn't run into a lot of souls, but you can see that. Yeah, and then I'm leeching back with guided arrow. So you can see that it can handle the souls pretty well, especially with your resistances so high. Whoa. Oh. Yeah, and freezing arrow can do pretty good damage. The interesting thing about actually both lightning fury and in a way freezing arrow is they actually do. The more monsters there are, the more damage. Whoa, the more damage you're gonna do. Okay, now we have some souls. The more damage you're gonna do to each individual monster, which is kind of interesting because of the pierce. So if you have a big group of monsters, and you shoot some frozen arrows at them. So especially if it depends on the pierce effect, right? So it hits a monster, and because it explodes. So it hits a monster, it explodes on him, and that explosion hurts the monster you hit and the one behind it. Then it pierces, hits the monster behind, okay, hits that monster and the one in front, and the one behind that. You see what I'm saying? So so if you have more monsters for it to pierce and hit, then you're actually going to do... then you might be hitting the same monster 2 or 3 times with the same arrow. And that effect also holds when a monster is against a wall. It'll pierce the monster and hit the wall behind the monster, and then explode a second time. So you're actually doing wow, look how much mana that mana pot, because souls steal mana as well, so that's super annoying. So it'll hit the wall behind the monster. And so that way, if a monster is against the wall, you're hitting it twice with a frozen arrow. So, and the same thing with Lightning Fury. It hits a monster, it releases, in this case, 33 bolts, and then it pierces the one behind that and releases another 33. I believe this is how it works, correct? And so the more monsters... Oh, Kyle's in. I only have 20 of those. So the more monsters there are to hit, the more damage you do to each individual monster. So yeah, it's super powerful against big groups. Not as good against single target, unfortunately. It's a little it's not a great boss killer. That's where this build kind of falls down a little bit. Holy shit. Yeah, one thing I have is terrible poison resistance. Yeah, that's where this build falls down a little bit. And by the way, sometimes I like to just shoot things out like this, and you can freeze things a little bit and then jab them down. Yeah, so one area where this guy falls down a little bit is boss killing. That's why I put this, a Home Sudan with some Crushing Blow on my Merc, just to make that, just to do that. I have a Crown of Ages on my Merc as well. If I find a use for this, I'm definitely going to take it off, but I had it laying around. Your Merc has to be pretty tough for this build. You really need a good Merc, because he's out there, you don't have a Valkyrie, so he's your only meat shield. And he has to be pretty tough and to have some Crushing Blow for bosses. So, yeah, the Merc was tough to get right, actually. And I made him a Holy Freeze Merc. That's actually more for his benefit than for mine. Well, it's all for my benefit, but it's so that he can survive. I'm doing most of the damage anyway, so it's good for him if he slows down the monsters and he doesn't take as much damage. But, yeah, this is a super solid build. I actually really have been enjoying this build. Oh man, I've had some very feisty Bales. You know, sometimes Bales sometimes he just sits there and just lets you whack away at him forever. Other times he like teleports everywhere and summons his clone 3 times and has these things going. And it's just, with this character, I don't know why, Bale is very feisty. Very feisty. Very feisty Bale. Yeah. But it's good, and the leech is good. Oh, and one thing about stats. So I put about stats and about freezing arrow. So I put, I got my life to about 1,000, and then I pumped dex, is what I did. And the reason I did that is because I believe the way that freezing arrow works, when I first made this build, I had assumed that freezing arrow was a little bit more like lightning fury. You know, no attack rating, always hits. But the thing about freezing arrow is, you know, so there's a physical component, the arrow, and a cold damage component, the explosion. So, what I understand, or what I've noticed, is that the freezing component always hits. The arrow, not necessarily, I believe. And I think that you only leech mana off of the physical component, right? But you don't leech off of elemental damage. So I think it's actually pretty good to have high attack rating on your frozen arrow side. So that's why I pump dex. And I have a couple attack rating charms. These also have run walk, so that was good. Oh, that's shit. It's kind of okay. So that's why I do that. So that's why I pump dex. Yeah, so those are the main components of the build. The only last thing I would say is just once again, it's definitely a build that can work with much cheaper equipment. I think it might be, I don't know, it's the best Amazon build I've done because I tried a pure Javazon and it, you know, you can't really do that unless you have Infinity. And I also tried a pure physical Boson and I have that going and it works, but it's kind of shitty. It's like you need, the resistance is, actually that character has very bad resistance and I couldn't find a way to get good resistance. So I found, this is my favorite Javazon build, Amazon build I've ever done. And it could definitely work with all levels of equipment. For instance, you don't need, everything I have is pretty cheap except Chains of Honor is expensive, but you could do, like I said, with an Ormus, or like even a Viper Magi. And honestly, you know what's a super good helm from this build is Shaco. Get a Shaco, dude. The mana bonus is honestly what makes Shaco like a killer fucking helm for this build. Obviously, Griffin's is like the best, and I like my Nightwings for the cold damage, but Shaco would be super fucking dope. Not purely, but because it has skills and all that shit, but especially if you're not gonna have all this damage reduction. Get 10 on your helm. You know what I mean? Man, and the life bonus, the life and the mana bonus would be super good, super fucking good. Yeah. So that's the build. I tried a lot of different setups. Like I said, I'm not even convinced that this is the best possible setup out of the things I have, but it feels good. It's the one I kind of choose my gear kind of based on just feel. You know what I mean? I don't really do like a lot of like calculations at all. I just kind of try different things on, and I do runs, and I just see how it feels. And this feels pretty good. Anyway, that is the build. That's the character. Yeah, catch you guys later. I just wanted to add my name to the people who are ripping off Xtimus, stealing. I was so insulted not to be mentioned in that video, by the way. You know? Hey, come on. I mean, I know I don't stream. By the way, I guess I could just put all my magic finding on YouTube and I would actually make money. Is that right? I just have to film myself doing magic finding? Like, I magic find, you know? All these Dabrowski guys and whatever. You know, he just magic finds and streams, and people pay him for that shit? What the fuck? I'm doing all this shit for free. Oh, man. Anyway. But yeah, I was super insulted not to be mentioned in the video. Like, I didn't watch that whole video, because who actually could watch that whole video, you know what I'm saying? But like, oh, poor guy. Poor guy. He needs to get his life a little bit in balance, you know what I'm saying? Looking a little bit off balance, you know what I mean? I think there's some times in life where you do things because you got nothing else going on and it's fine. But then there are times when you have nothing going on because you do things and it's not fine. You know what I mean? So it's up to each person to strike that balance in his or her life. Yeah, poor guy. But, you know, I just want to add my name, you know, to the people who are stealing and ripping off of Xtimus, stealing his builds, stealing his ideas. That's all I do. This is my life. It's my whole life, just ripping this guy off. You can't see me, but I have blue hair. Oh, just kidding. Oh, shit. All right. So that's the build. I would encourage people, the single player community, to make this build. If you want to make a cool Amazon build, it's pretty dope. Works really good. And yeah, I think it's fun. I like this build. Alright. Catch y'all later. Entropy Spiral. Wow. That's a good name.